Okay. So welcome to our another type. Oh my gosh. Welcome to our podcast. I'm Thomas. This is George and Errol. And as we were continuing from last week, we want to discuss more of our history and what we have done together. So for context, maybe George can start off with the idea that started us all together. Like, how did we come together? How did we meet each other and everything? And then we can kind of go from there, because there's a lot of lessons to be learned from our startup, which was Coopsight in the past.
Yeah, it's a really long story. It was like started in 2019,
Yes.
maybe even earlier. I think 2019. Yeah. So it all started in 2019. Like a short background, we were all at NYU. I didn't know Thomas until we met to discuss the project, but I knew Errol since we were in a Chinese class together, which I had to take twice. but that's not the point. The point was that I went to internship in a VC fund in Germany, and then I came back to Shanghai, and I realized that there's all of those big tech companies in China, and they're all investing themselves into like crazy amounts of startups, and they all have a lot of synergies with the portfolio companies. But the European VC and the West kind of VC model didn't really accommodate for this. So I wanted to somehow find ways to, I guess it was like to find synergies between startups. That was the initial idea. And then I got Errol and Thomas on board. And then, of course, it changed to a completely different project, which Thomas or Errol, you guys can talk about.
Yeah, I think it went kind of really weird in the beginning, because when I first met you guys, first Errol was like, "Oh yeah, like there's a cool guy. His name is George. He's working on something, and I kind of want to work on it too. Would you want to work on it with us?" And I'm not gonna lie, I did have a lot of skepticisms, because this was my first like reach into startup world. I had no clue like what does that mean, right? Like, what is this? What is the whole point of doing anything? Because at that point I was just more like straight shooting, let's go and find skills to get into a job and all that stuff. But it did get me thinking after hearing. I remember George came like on the first day that I met you. You had like a giant like stack of papers of like justifying a startup idea, and I was like, "What? Yo, this is a lot of reading. Like, what's up with that?" But yeah, it was
I
very
remember that.
interesting. Yeah, it was interesting because it definitely, like, I think my life has definitely changed because of that. There's a lot of reasons and a lot of things that I learned after the fact, but certainly having someone that was like really enthusiastic to start off with, regardless of what the idea was, kind of jump started me to want to like work with someone that was go getting on something that's like maybe not, a very common path. So that's why I started. But Errol, you can kind of pitch in, I guess.
Honestly, whatever it was, I just wanted to work on things outside of school. And I remember me and George, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but initially the first project we've ever worked on,
The Facebook scraping.
yeah, we might have scraped some data from Facebook just to I don't want to get into the details because there might be some legal implications, but I'm pretty sure it was all legal. But that was like the first project we worked on. And going off of these, the synergies that George you were just talking about, honestly, I was just excited to work on really anything outside of school that, I don't know, like piqued my interest. Like I didn't ever think of it as like, okay, this is going to be $1 billion startup. I was just like, oh, this is fucking cool. George is cool. Thomas, you joined later on, and I'm like, oh, Thomas is cool. Let's just fuck it up. Why not?
Yeah.
But I remember that in terms of the idea itself, the key component was just synergies. What that meant changed so much over the years. It started out, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but it started out with just purely like synergies within industries. And because I remember we were looking at China and India and the United States, and we're just straight up looking at agriculture. How is it related to healthcare? Like things like that. So it started out synergies at the really high level. And then we worked down to, what was it? I think it was VCs. And then we did their portfolio companies. And then we did startups, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So so we didn't have like a very clear problem, I think, that we were solving, which I mean we can get into a little bit later on. But the key idea has always been synergies. And what that meant over time kept on changing as we were getting new feedback. We were listening in on, I don't want to say customers, but we were listening in on a lot of people who were trying our product that said, hey, I don't think you guys should do this. I think maybe you should focus in on, for example, our startups, because we saw that there was the most interest there. So we kept on pivoting over time, but the key idea was always finding synergies amongst some, I guess, people or some companies or whatever, some entities. And that, I think as well, that was one of the biggest issues we had was the fact that we weren't too clear in terms of who are we trying to solve this problem for, because I don't know, like at one point I think we kind of lost our vision just because we kept on pivoting, we kept on making adjustments, which is good for a startup to do, but in the end I think that kind of screwed us over a little bit. But yeah, I kind of went off track a little bit, but yeah, like the whole history started off as synergies at like the highest level in the industries, and then we went down to startups, which is where we eventually left Coopsight at.
Sometimes I wonder, like, just from a hindsight point of view, you know, you kind of bring up that point that it's all very big picture, and then we kind of worked our ways from top down, which was like, I think it could still work if you do that process for other types of startups, but just like from hindsight thinking, it's much easier to like start very small and then build up from there. Like I remember, George, when we, after all this giant like stacks of papers and pitching and everything, and then we had our first like meeting and everything, right? The one thing that like George kept saying was, hey guys, like this is my workflow as an analyst in that European VC, like German VC, right? And like this is a struggle, like this sucks, this process sucks. And then we kind of like did the worst thing possible, which is to disregard like the person that would have that insight and be like, well, you could just do this, right? So why didn't you do that? And then that was like what shaped our assumptions going forward. But I still wonder, like, if we just built that like very simple thing, showed that to that VC, and then like continue on from there, would that have been like more bottom up and changed the course of history? Because it's like, you know, MVP in a sense, it would have been like stupidly simple, but you would have gotten like way more like, you know, in the squad of like adjacent problems. So what do you guys think?
I think that was the biggest problem. I agree. I think I at least had kind of a more grandiose vision, and even if maybe you guys also wanted to work on something more relatable, I feel like me myself, I haven't really pushed in that direction at all, because yeah, I saw the problem, I might have even communicated it, but we all had this like vision of how this could be, you know, universal in use cases, used across different industries outside of VC. And I think that was, yeah, one of the flaws, which with the benefit of hindsight obviously shouldn't have been like the first MVP focus.
Yeah, I mean, even building MVP, I feel like we all learned the first like ephemeral shitty lesson from startup world, which is just like, don't build the product until you understand the problem, right? Like, like I'm sure with your guys like continued experience now in chem, and then also for your for Elise, right? Like there's a thing to be said that you shouldn't build before you understand like what it is that they're there to solve. And solutions can come in many different ways. I'm still struggling with like this gap between what I would consider an MVP, but obviously like just going from what we've learned so far and like just a history lesson, it's very easy to over engineer something. Like it's kind of in our natural inclination to do so.
Yeah, and we made I counted it at one point, but over the course of Coopsight, I think it was 12 MVPs we made. Something ridiculous like that. 12. I wrote it all out and I put it on my board too. And I even have the picture for it. But it's like we just kept on getting like some feedback, and then we just built an MVP for that. But once again, like we never like really fully understood the customer's problem. And I think what another issue that we had that's kind of related was when we went to Web Summit, and just a quick little background. So we basically formed like Coopsight. We generally said, yeah, we're gonna match, you know, companies together, looking at the products, services, the locations, whatnot. And then we got into this conference to basically have a booth called Web Summit in Lisbon, Portugal. So the three of us went, and to this day, that's probably the best. That is like the milestone in my life that I would say really got me in the door in terms of like, this is the world I kind of want to be in. You know,
Same.
software, just startup world. It doesn't even have to be just like
Yeah.
startups like on that end, but it can also be like on the investment end. Like that entire world I absolutely love. But at Web Summit in particular, we went there, we had a very shitty, I don't want to call it an MVP, but what was it? We built it with, well, we didn't build it. You built it,
Oh
Thomas, with Squarespace.
gosh. So we made a
Yeah.
Squarespace and it was just like it was just literally details coming like just a piece of paper of like a company and this company. We think it's gonna like do well if they did this type of
Yeah.
partnership. That was it.
We had
And
like
then-
three like pre-built examples,
yes,
and we
yes.
told people this is a full algorithm that runs those
Yes.
things.
Yeah, we built a product with Squarespace and we fucking were presenting it to all these big time
Like big
investors.
VCs.
You know? Yeah, IBM Podolph, and that was just so funny. Yeah, that was an error on our part, but it got the job done, just to begin with at Web Summit. But an interesting thing was at Web Summit though, and this is, in my opinion, this is like this is the problem that sticks with me to this day that I consistently think about, and that's that all of the feedback we were getting was, "Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's nice. That's a good idea." It was all very generic things like that, where it make us feel like, yeah, we're on the right path. But at the end of the day, that's not really the feedback we wanted. We needed people to say, "Hey, you guys are solving my problem. This is so and so such a big fucking headache for me. Thank you guys so much. When can I sign up?" Instead of people saying like, "Oh, that's a good idea. Oh, that's nice." Because I think, going back, I think it was maybe 30 or 40 people that we showed the product to. Every single one of them was like, "Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's nice, whatever." And that kind of led us on, that led us astray, because we were like, yeah, this is exactly what we need to do. We're getting feedback, our version of feedback, and therefore we'll just keep iterating MVP, MVP, MVP. And that false sense of, I guess, of us being on the right path, like really fucked us over. And I think that stayed with us for like 2 years, until really the very end, where we eventually did an NYU summer sprint. And they basically said like, yeah, you guys are kind of fucking idiots. You need to get like hardcore feedback, not just people saying it's good or it's nice. But yeah, I would say that's like the biggest problem that stays with me to this day.
Yeah, I think also it's like, I think successful things is where everything lines up. In terms of failure, there's so many elements to it. There's also this element of, well, there were just so many mistakes. There's thousands of them. One of them is like, we decided to launch. So I was really pushing for it. This was, I think, one of the stupidest things I've done. I was really pushing for a launch on Christmas, or like 3 days before Christmas.
Oh my gosh.
And I knew well, working in the VC space, that first half of January is like dead season. There's no funds working. Startups are also out. We had a European focus, like there were a lot of people celebrating New Year. And we launched on Christmas, which also meant that the US North America market wasn't gonna use this product. It was a stupid thing. Leading up to it, we also forced people to work through their finals, which was like also extremely hard to balance. So it's so many different problems. Obviously, the biggest one stems from the lack of need of a product. That's always the case. So if you get that right, that's the first step. But there's so many other elements to it as well that you have to account for. Like, I also don't like the narrative of where like people say like, oh, you just get the problem right, and that's it. In reality, there's still so many people that get the problem right, but they don't build on top of the foundation, and they also don't end up anywhere. So we had like a double lesson, I'd say.
I would say,
lots of lessons.
Coming out of like Coopsight was just like it's like such a learning experience. I'm glad we talked about this today, because like I feel for all of us, it's not really like a lesson of like, oh, pity us and everything. It's like a lesson learned, because then you can carry this forward for your next ventures. But like I definitely, like, thinking about it, kind of feel like there was a lot of oxymoronic moments in their history of working on that startup together, because we were essentially building like a VC ecosystem deal flow sort of thing. Like synergy is exactly what Arrow was talking about, like trying to connect portfolio companies together. and we like got in front of like a crap ton of VCs. So like these are
Yeah.
VCs that other people might be like struggling to even find contacts for. But I remember George just like scraping the crap out of LinkedIn and like just knows who to talk to. And then we get in front of them and then we show them the product and they're like, yeah, that's cool. But then it's like
Yeah.
they would ask us, hey, do you like need investing? But they wouldn't use the product, right? Like it was like they
Yeah.
were more
Yeah.
happy to invest in us and the idea than the actual product to use as a VC.
Which is already like a sign that something might be off if you can't get your
Yeah.
customer to use your product. And
Yeah.
I also remember that there were like some of those VCs, they gave us some really good feedback, I feel like, but we kind of like thought that, okay, maybe they're not the right customer for our product. Let's like dig deeper and find the right customer. And then we're like down to like 3 like funds in the whole world that actually we thought needed our product, which they, by the way, did not need our product at all. They have like completely different objectives. So I feel like also you need to make sure there's more than one customer for your product. If there's one person that needs it, it literally means nothing. And until that person pays you money, that doesn't mean anything at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you guys think like if you had to boil down all of this experience though into like one major lesson that you got out of it, aside from the one that we're saying like we got to find what the product's problem is, like if you had to condense,
Yeah.
it could be anything across like how we managed the team, it could be how we, you know, even sourced and got contacts and like, you know, clients potentially, how we ran products development, all of these things, every aspect under the sun. What maybe was your largest lesson that you learned along the way?
Errol, do you have any ideas? I have a few, but it's just a little bit hard to pinpoint
Oh,
the key.
I got a lot. I'm just trying to see like which, like yeah, like it's very interesting. We're about to directly answer your question like right now, Thomas. It's very interesting
Yeah.
because a lot of people, while I was working on Coopsight, people were saying, and I'm sure people came to you guys and said this too, where oh, it's okay that you're not billions of dollars yet. You're learning so much, and I've always kind of like rolled my eyes at that, and I'm just like, all right, well, fuck off. Like I've always thought that was like kind of like a cop out a little bit because
Yeah.
you get experience doing fucking anything. I'm gonna be honest, like that. I still hold some truth to that, but at the same time, like the amount of lessons we've learned would just it was just an incredible experience over the 2 or 2.5 years. And
Yeah.
if I had to boil down to just one single lesson, in just the biggest simplification is just build a product, but first find the problem.
Okay.
Yes. Very, very simple, very straightforward, very generic. But that I would say is the biggest thing, because I think that's alluding to a lot of what we've just been talking about, which is just, in terms of like feedback, in terms of like just finding any customers, you have to find the problem and then build the product from that, as opposed to just kind of building a product and retrofitting and trying to find a problem that your product solves. Very simple, generic, but there's many, many lessons.
My lesson that I got out of this as like more of the operations sort of person, this might come as a shock, but I think you guys maybe, I want to hear your thoughts if you think this was correct. My biggest lesson was like the whole fact of don't try to over optimize or like over plan more than you should have, right? So like we would have meetings for like 3-4 hours. And there was a point in time I remember when we were like, oh yeah, we're so like devoted to our startup, because like no other like dumbass is going to do like a 3-hour 4-hour meeting like every day of the week, right? Like I remember this, right? And the reality is like we were doing so much planning that it really meant we weren't doing anything per se to advance like what our preconceptions were. We were just voicing like a lot more assumptions and like basically going down a thread of assumptions to lead to like an argument, which it basically creates so many abstractions that it made us like be so far ahead of like anything else, like far ahead in the sense that like our team would not even understand what the hell we were talking about, because we had like probably
Yeah.
10x amount of conversations in like a time span of like 5 hours that they didn't, they weren't part of, and they shouldn't be part of to a certain degree, because it's like not needed. Like you don't even need these
Yeah.
conversations. You just need to do them. You just need to do product development or, the customer research, like directly talking
Yeah.
to customers.
But it's not just them, it's also us too. Like we shouldn't be having like 4 hour meetings 3 times
Yeah.
a week. And if I remember during that Christmas time, that Christmas product launch that George mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, I think we had one Zoom call go for what? It was over 24 hours, I think. Where people
Yes.
would just kind of
Yes.
go in and out, like 18 hours you, 12 hours you. It was that shit was fucking crazy. But yeah, I just want to plus one that point too, Thomas.
Yeah,
Dark
like
days.
totally. I think in total we had more time devoted to Coopsight spent on calls than on like any other work, including
Yeah.
coding, including reaching out,
Yeah.
including like customer feedback loops. But
Yeah.
my biggest takeaway, I had some time to process to like rank them. It's just letting people, team members, do their work and execute on their ideas they have, because everything went into this like weekly discussion or monthly discussion where we prioritized on things, and we thought that us three, like especially like kind of I had this thinking that like we know best, we have a vision and the employees don't, and you need to lead them with that vision, like shove it down their throats. In reality, there were so many good ideas that the team had that we didn't execute because we thought it didn't fit like the vision, like the mold that we created for them, that at the end it was only us three working and everyone else was trying to fit our vision of the product, which wasn't any work done. It's just them trying to like understand what we're even talking about. So yeah, I like team, allowing the team to have the freedom, creative freedom to execute on the ideas they have is best. Where there's no need for a meeting, you can just go and execute on that. And that also could help us discern who is the employee who is willing to take kind of like initiative versus the one that don't. Because in our case, we block the person with initiative, and in the end, their output was just as much as the person who didn't do any work at all.
Do you think that affected, because I want to give a little bit context. We had like around, at the top end of the organization, we had around 12 people in total, like all working on this at the highest point, right? Where we were just, everybody setting out, has different missions. You do this, that guy does that, right? With all of this being said, and all of like the lessons that we got out of the hindsight, do you think this changes your like mentality on how you should do leading, delegating, working with other people? Like, do you have any lessons from that point?
For sure. I think it's like experience I got from Coopsight, also backed by, a lot of business reading and also doing a few other projects. When you piece all of that together, it suddenly becomes a lot more clear. And I think in general, like after you have some experience, understanding the more theoretical part of it is a lot easier, and you can put it in context, which is key. So having done all of that, I think we should have given a lot more creative freedom, as I mentioned, to pretty much the whole team. And then kind of also ensuring that we didn't take the majority of the time from any discussion at all that we had, that where the team actually leads, and we're just there to help catch them if they're falling down, I think that's really key, and it doesn't matter if you're later stage or early startup. That's something that I should have followed, and I am following now, with the benefit of that hindsight.
Well, I can go first.
How about you guys?
I feel like
Have
I feel like I've learned a lesson in terms of like how minimal the team can be to actually drive up growth. Like there's a whole conversation or thought process of like flow state, which is that if you have people that are like not doing anything, it's boring, right? But if it's too challenging, then you just want to like give it up, right? Like ideally, any sort of leader should kind of find that flow state for each member. And part of me, like, again, from a hindsight point of view, kind of like felt like we had certain people doing a lot of work and then other people weren't doing as much work, not because they didn't like want to, but it's exactly like the problem where maybe they weren't like easily allocated to like, hey, we need you for this like problem, and you can have full like creative domain to try to figure it out. We just didn't have that many like opportunities to release that. And the reality is like having 12 people with no product market fit or even a customer, right, is like a huge team for like very little work. And even saying like, a Squarespace website was trash for Web Summit, the joke here is that like amongst us three, like we made this on a whim like 1 week before. And even then it probably garnered more like conversations with people, sure, certainly because it's Web Summit, but like it garnered more conversations about like what the idea even like stands for, that we could share much quicker to customers than like even our team. So like I just feel like having so many opportunities to get more people doesn't necessarily mean like it was the best idea to get everyone. It just would have been good to see what's the minimal amount of team that we can have to like churn out something very simple, to then be able to have every one of us challenged, but also very, very like I guess connected once we achieve those small wins.
Yeah.
Errol, do you have anything else to say about that?
I think, well, the two of you right now are both managing people in your respective companies. So right now I'm the one being managed. So I haven't been able to really apply anything I've learned in terms of like managing a team, empowering people, as George was mentioning. But I will say that our team I'm still shocked. And I tell people to this day too, that I'm shocked by how fucking amazing our team was back at Coopsight. I have no idea why they stuck with us to this day. I mean, it's crazy to me that we had 12 people and most of them stayed.
By the way, we never paid anyone.
Yeah.
Like literally, it's probably maybe the only case of a startup in the world that survived for 2 years, which with an average head count of 10 people at any given time, that never paid a single dime to anyone.
Well, we didn't incorporate too. Let's clarify this from like a legal point of view. So if any lawyer comes to us, we didn't like break any labor laws, right? Like just to clarify, right? Because we didn't even get to a product that sold any money, so we literally had no revenue
I can't
and no
call
like
them employees,
expenses.
Co-collaborators,
whatever, founders, whatever we could call
co-founders, I'll say. Yeah. And that's that is crazy to me, man. Like we had such an amazing team, and I feel like we really didn't really enable them as much as I think we should have. But seriously, like looking back, Coopsight, I mean, the three of us are fucking amazing. Like, come on, like let's be honest. Our entire team is fucking phenomenal. I don't understand. Like I said, it's incredible they stuck with us, and I love each and every one of them for that. But we had an amazing team. Our vision was fairly good and fairly strong, but at the end of the day, we just couldn't execute and we couldn't enable our team, and it was just issues with the three of us at the end of the day that we just couldn't guide the company to the right direction. So I mean, lesson learned. I mean, 2 years later, it took a while, but I mean, that's just the way the world works sometimes. We might have thrown 2 years of our life at something that in the end just ultimately didn't work out, but we've learned a lot, and hopefully, and well, not hopefully, I know we're actually applying those lessons to our lives today.
Yeah.
Question: do you guys think that this 2 years was A, worth it, and B, if you knew the outcome, would you have started it? Would you still go through the journey? I guess not if you knew like the full outcome, but if you knew that there were really high risks of not being able to succeed, which is the normal case with VCs, like VC backed projects and startups, would you still try to do this for the experience?
Well, I would say I definitely appreciate it, and I definitely say that it was worth the time, even though like the investment of maybe the outcome didn't pay off like truly we're all billionaires or whatever, right? Like that didn't happen. At the end of the day, we learned so many lessons that I carry forward. And so like if I would do it like again, knowing what I know now, I would definitely be just being me. Like I would have definitely changed a lot of different small things that might have like led us to hopefully a better outcome, because like it's hard to say, oh yeah, I would definitely want to take an L like again, right? Like on purpose, when it really would just take like the minuscule amount of like just adjustments to actually have reached maybe product market fit, or to even like get to like pretty good customer base, right? I think that's the truth. Like we were not so far off that we just like missed everything. We were like literally it's like when there's survivors and you're like right next to the road, but you're so in the forest that you don't realize like you're right next to it. So you just like go maybe like parallel. We weren't going away from the road, but we were like going parallel, and we just didn't think there was a road. That's the problem. So I would say it teaches me that like we need to get to a road if you're doing any extra startup. But like at the end of the day, I don't regret it, because now, you know, being in the forest, looking at the trees, and then also realizing there's a road paved in gold, if you can hit it, is exciting. It's much more exciting than like a 9 to 5. Not saying that that's a bad thing, Errol, but like it's better than, you know, trying to follow what other people tell you you should be doing. You're kind of making that journey for yourself. Yeah,
I would.
I
I would
Errol,
agree
you
too.
have 3-ish minutes. So any closing remarks in regard to this? This is our last question.
It's funny that you should mention this question, because I actually thought about this a lot in terms of like, was it worth it? And if I knew the outcome, would I still pursue it? And a kind of sad and almost depressing thing is, for a while, I probably would not have done it again, looking back at the end result. But I would say in the past like 6 months, my mentality has changed quite a bit. Primarily, well, of course, like I'm not including the fact that the three of us worked together. We worked for an
Yeah.
amazing team, but it's like I sat there and I'm just like, I don't think I can't tell you if it was worth it or not. It wasn't that I was like hard set on like, no, it wasn't worth it. Well, yes, it was. I just didn't know the answer for a long time. But I would say in the past 6 months, my mentality changed to where now I don't have any regrets at all, and I don't think that's a very healthy thing to even have. But I don't think I would have had it any other way. It makes our lives a lot more interesting. The fact that we did 2 years of Coopsight, and that we worked together, and that we were iterating products, that we went to Lisbon, that we had an amazing team, that we failed tremendously, without also going bankrupt, I should say, which is very good for a startup to do. I'm very proud of us guys.
Yeah, it's like free experience without really like a negative outcome from it.
Yeah.
Any negatives, yeah.
So I would say no. I actually relish it. I don't have any regrets at all. And if there are like small things, of course, there's like minor things that I can change here and there, but I can't think about that. I can just think about what we've learned, the experiences we had, you know, working in a hotel room or a hotel lobby, I guess, at like 3 or 4 in the morning, homeless guy coming in asking for directions. It's like all of those like little things you just can't regret. And I just good times, by the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Well, there we
Me
have
too.
it. I think that's a great end to this podcast. We'll definitely bring, you know, Coopsight into the fold in other future conversations. But for this podcast, thanks for everybody tuning in. This is our time about Coopsight. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
This was good, guys.